Blind Enthusiasm Hurts the Truth by Achim Germany Wassermannzeit. 178 translation by Vibka Wallder.
Believing every word that others say. Wild enthusiasm and irrational fighting do not lead to results in the fight for the truth. Rather, always rationality, intellect, coherent logical thinking, considerateness, having foresight, perseverance, understanding, and, not least, much patience. Thus, for example, it does not yield anything positive if supposed with held rights in connection with the FIGU mission shall be resented by a lawyer or resolved in court. That is to say, to demand in front of an authority, in order to help oneself possibly to a purely juristically entitled right or to settle a perceived deficit when it comes to the allocation of rights, permissions, and so forth. Such an approach towards agents, size, organizations, and other associations without an acute reason and without direct necessity, e.g., if a FIGU group is attacked judicially on their part, is unwise and not compatible with the fulfillment of the FIGU, because it corresponds to illogical Gewalt, which in turn would result in counter-Gewalt in the form of bans, exclusions, and judicial convictions if need be. This does not conform to the principles of the mission quiet revolution of the truth. Although it may seem unbearable for some FIGU members to let time work for them and to have to muster almost unhuman patience, because apparently no tangible successes ensue with the work for the mission, it must be said again and again. The truth as certainty and recognition of the reality can always only be worked out by each individual human being by means of his or her own efforts and initiatives that are absolutely voluntary, independent, and unchallenged in any shape or form. And this effort only plays out in the consciousnesses of the human beings, because for each individual it is an inner fight which he or she must fight out and win in himself/herself. If he or she wants to throw away all irrational imaginations and credenda and wants to perceive and recog, niece the reality of the truth and finally work it out in himself/herself into knowledge and wisdom. Any kind of pressure with the spreading of information and truths only creates counter-pressure, unwillingness, and Gewalt in the form of resistance or in the form of arbitrariness by the authorities, which bring the FIGU into disrepute and do more harm to it than good. That has nothing to do with practicing moral cowardice, caving in and drawing in one's horns, rather with rationality and realism. The FIGU does not need fanatics, but calm contributors who concentrate on the essential tasks of the association, and this preferably without any fuss, without senseless fripp-parry, and with senseful alignment with the zela and principles of the community. That does not mean that no individual ideas and opinions can be brought in, and that the individuality must not be lived out, quite to the contrary. A community always lives by the ideas, initiatives, and idiosyncrasies of the individual members. However, an enthusiasm that is wrongly understood and not guided onto rational tracks, supposed heroism for the truth, or perhaps even a tendency to martyrdom for a matter, that is to say, an ideal like the one of FIGU, is after all also a form of fanatical delu, scion and therewith counterproductive, because through wrong imaginings, having a bee in one's bonnet and irrational literalism, the FIGU members get tangled up in sense, less fights, whereby they lose sight of what is important and essential in the FIGU mission. And that is, primarily and urgently before anything else, one's own consciousness, evolution, in order to learn and understand as much as possible in the current life about creational natural laws and recommendations, and to implement them as creational, natural values in one's own character, in one's own personality. Whoever is at risk of losing the healthy measure here, or who wants to sacrifice himself/herself for the truth out of his or her low-intelligence heroism towards the antagonistic mites, whereby, without thinking, he or she also jeopardizes his or her job, his or her college place, and so forth, should stop his or her childish behavior as soon as possible, before reality overtakes him or her, and he/she comes back down to earth with a bang. Whoever wants to achieve the best for the mission and the truth should study the spiritual teaching, That is to say, teaching of the truth, teaching of the spirit, teaching of the life, urgently and profoundly, as well as let it work and come to effect within him or her. In fact, in the overall connection with the given actualities of his or her time, his or her individual life, his/her disposition, his or her character, and his or her fundamental task as a human being. If single sentences and terms are picked out of the spiritual teaching and are taken as reason for a heroic fight for the truth, that is to say, if they are torn from the context of the whole, then the whole thing goes into the direction against which the Figu must guard itself under all circumstances, namely, in a sectarian, dictatorial, and human-hostile direction, which has nothing to do anymore with the principles, ideals, and values of the Figu, the spiritual teaching. Whoever displays such tendencies and is still teachable about it should deliberately listen to the good advice and experience values of older human beings, that is to say, experience Figu members, and steer his or her enthusiasm for the matter. The mission of the Figu puts himself or herself on the same level with the methods of the churches, sects, orders, and so forth. For example, with the Jehovah's Witnesses, who want to win their lambs for their cause with all admissible and unfair means by setting about and terrorizing the human beings again and again with their unrealistic writings, worldviews, and coercive methods, because they cannot comprehend that their teaching, their truth, is not the truth of the reality, and not the truth of the creation and all being and being, rather only a purely human-made brain delusion without value and substance. One cannot force the truth, but one can learn to perceive and accept one's own errors, inadequacies, and weaknesses by means of cognition of the truth, and one can control them in oneself by means of hard work, whereby one more and more becomes a true human being and the victor over oneself. Here the actual fight of the human being takes place, and not externally in a fight against fell, low human beings, agencies, or authorities, who supposedly have such a low intelligence and unreasonableness. The quiet revolution of the truth is therefore quiet because it is a process of the consciousness, which progresses slowly and must be worked for daily in the stillness of one's own self. Extract from the Figu text Loquaciousness and Missionizing. The experience shows that the general understanding in regard to the teaching of the Spirit is still very thin on the ground. This non-understanding can even lead so far that relationships even between closest friends get broken, because differences, quarrel, and discord can arise. Additionally, this is aggravated if one tries at all costs to force one's own opinion onto one's counterpart. We are neither secret society members nor prattling missionaries, rather human beings who first and foremost make an effort to open their eyes for themselves. Excerpt from the book Goblet of the Truth, Chapter 9, 46. And if you are not equipped with good knowledge in the teaching of the truth, the teaching of the Spirit, the teaching of the life, then do not decide to go out in order to spread the truth teaching. Rather be averse to such because without sufficient knowledge you can do more harm than good success. Therefore you shall stay back, remain at home, with the other sedentary ones remaining at home, if you are not sufficiently skillful, well-versed/well-read in the teaching. 47. If you go out to spread the truth and you are not sciently skillful, well-versed/well-read, then you will increase the worries of those who are to be taught, and also your own worries, because it is through your insufficient knowledge in the truth that you will run backwards and forwards without finding any stability, which gives rise to discord between you and the ones to be taught, because some will listen to you and some will be against you if you cannot explain the things of the truth to a sufficient extent insufficiently, therefore leading to doubt and misunderstandings as well as outrage acts of Gewalt.